The day the Viridian ships appeared in Earth's sky changed everything. They came without warning, 3 massive vessels that hung over major cities like glittering emeralds. Panic gave way to wonder as the aliens announced they came in peace. Captain Lisa Reed straightened her uniform before entering the meeting room. At 35, she hadn't expected to become humanity's first diplomat to an alien species. The room fell silent as the Viridian delegation entered. They were beautiful in an unsettling way. Tall with skin that shimmered like polished jade and eyes that seemed to change color with their mood. All female, or at least that's what humans assumed, since they all had feminine features by Earth standards. Ambassador Thala, their leader, moved with fluid grace. She looked down at Lisa, literally, as she stood nearly 7 feet tall. Captain Reed, Thala said, her voice musical yet somehow cold. Your leaders have chosen you to represent Earth. Interesting. Lisa kept her face neutral. I'm honored to welcome you to our planet, Ambassador. Yes, Thala replied, glancing around the room with barely hidden disdain. Your planet. The meeting proceeded with the expected formalities. The Viridians shared information about their home system, their advanced technology, and their interest in establishing relations with Earth. But Lisa noticed the small smiles they exchanged when human representatives talked about Earth's accomplishments. During a break, Lisa overheard 2 Viridian officials talking near the refreshment table. Their technology is barely past combustion engines, one said, making no effort to lower her voice. And their reproduction methods, the other replied with a laugh. So inefficient. Half their population exists just for that purpose. Lisa approached them. I couldn't help overhearing. You find our reproduction methods amusing? The taller Viridian turned, not embarrassed to be caught. No offense intended, Captain. But yes, your species' need for 2 different sexes to create offspring is rather primitive. How do Viridians reproduce? Lisa asked directly. Ambassador Thala joined them. We evolved beyond such basic methods centuries ago. Viridian females can combine genetic material with other females to create offspring. No males needed. It's much more efficient. Interesting, Lisa said, though she noticed Thala didn't actually explain the details. Our biologists would be fascinated to learn more. Perhaps, Thala said with a tight smile, though I doubt your science could comprehend the complexities. After 3 days of negotiations, a preliminary agreement was reached. Earth would share resources and cultural knowledge, while the Viridians would provide limited technology exchanges. Most importantly, an exchange program would be established. Humans would visit the Viridian homeworld, and Viridians would spend time on Earth. As Lisa escorted the Viridians back to their shuttle, Thala paused. Your people handled this better than expected, Captain. What were you expecting? Lisa asked. Fear, aggression. That's what we've seen from other developing species. We can surprise you in many ways, Ambassador. Thala's eyes shifted to a deep purple, perhaps. But I doubt it. We've studied your kind, so focused on physical pleasure and emotional connections, so dependent on your biological differences. Those differences give us strength, Lisa replied. They make you vulnerable, Thala said, but will help you advance in time. After the Viridians departed, Lisa's superior called her in. You've been selected to oversee the exchange program, General Morris told her. The Viridians requested you specifically. They did. Lisa was surprised. They don't seem to think much of us. Morris nodded, which is why we're sending our best. Show them humans aren't to be underestimated. Lisa looked at the first candidate file for the exchange program, a biologist named James Miller. His file photo showed a serious-looking man with intelligent eyes. James Miller, she read aloud. Let's hope you're ready to represent humanity. Little did she know that this unassuming scientist would soon change the course of 2 civilizations forever. James Miller stared out the viewport as the Viridian ship approached their homeworld. Lustra looked like a giant crystal in space, its surface catching and reflecting the light of its sun. He had spent the 6-week journey studying everything Earth knew about the Viridians, which wasn't much. "Impressed human?" asked Vela, the Viridian officer assigned to him. Her tone made it clear she expected him to be. "It's beautiful," James admitted. "Different from Earth." "Very different," Vela agreed. "No pollution. No waste. No inefficiencies." The ship docked at a tall spire that seemed to grow out of the planet's surface. Inside, James found himself surrounded by green-skinned women, all at least a head taller than him. They stared at him with open curiosity and whispered to each other, "Is that what a male looks like? So small. How strange they need his kind to make babies." James kept his face neutral, though his cheeks burned. He was a scientist, not a zoo animal. Director Mira, head of the Viridian Science Academy, met him at the entrance. Her skin was darker than the others, almost emerald, and her eyes shone like polished stones. "Dr. Miller," she said without extending a hand. Viridians did not touch in greeting. "Welcome to Lustra. I trust you'll find our facilities adequate for your primitive research." "Thank you for the opportunity, Director," James replied, ignoring the insult. "I'm eager to learn from your people." Mira's mouth twitched. "Yes, learning. That is why you're here." She turned to a younger Viridian standing nearby. "Elia will show you to your quarters and explain your schedule." Elia was shorter than most Viridians, though still taller than James. Her skin had a bluish tint that set her apart. "This way, Dr. Miller," she said, her voice softer than the others he'd met. His quarters were small but comfortable, with strange floating furniture and walls that changed color based on the time of day. Through the window, he could see the crystal city stretching to the horizon. "The academy starts early," Elia explained. "You'll observe Viridian research but won't participate directly. Director Mira believes human methods would compromise our work." "Of course," James said, hiding his disappointment. "Will I be able to conduct my own research?" "In a limited capacity," Elia replied. "You'll have access to basic equipment." The next few days were difficult. James followed Viridian scientists around, watching as they conducted experiments with technology far beyond Earth's. They barely acknowledged him, except to occasionally ask questions about human biology that made him feel like a lab specimen. "Is it true human males can't control their mating urges?" one scientist asked during lunch. "That's not accurate," James replied calmly. "Human sexuality is complex and controlled by both biological and social factors." "How inefficient," another commented. "Viridians mate only for reproduction, and only when chosen by the council." One afternoon, James found himself alone in the academy library, searching through Viridian biological records. He noticed something odd: a declining birth rate over the past century. Each generation of Viridians produced fewer offspring. "You shouldn't be accessing those files," came a voice behind him. Elia stood there, but instead of anger, her expression showed concern. "I'm sorry," James said, standing. "I was just trying to understand." "No," Elia interrupted, glancing around to ensure they were alone. "I mean you shouldn't access them here, where others can see." James frowned. "I don't understand." Elia stepped closer, lowering her voice. "What you found, the birth rates. It's not discussed openly. It's why you're really here, though most won't admit it." "What do you mean?" "Our reproduction method is failing us," Elia whispered. "Each generation, more Viridians cannot produce offspring. The council is desperate for solutions." "And they think humans might help?" James asked, surprised. Elia's color-changing eyes shifted to a deep blue. "Some of us do. Others would rather die out than admit humans might save us." Before James could respond, they heard footsteps. Elia quickly moved away. "Remember," she said loudly, as others entered, "humans must only use the basic equipment section." But her eyes met his with a clear message. They would talk again. Soon. 3 days passed before Elia contacted James again. He found a note on his data pad one morning. Garden Dome. Midnight. Come alone. The Garden Dome sat on the edge of the Science Academy complex. At night, it glowed softly with bioluminescent plants from across the Viridian Empire. James slipped inside, careful to avoid the night guards. Elia waited beside a tall blue tree that pulsed with gentle light. "You came," she said, sounding relieved. "Of course," James replied. "You said the Viridians need help." Elia gestured for him to follow her deeper into the garden. "What I'm about to show you could get me banished," she said, "but I believe it's worth the risk." They reached a hidden panel in the garden wall. Elia pressed her palm against it, and a door slid open to reveal a small private laboratory. "My secret workspace," she explained. "Not even Director Mira knows about it." Inside, displays showed genetic sequences and birth rate statistics. James immediately recognized the downward trend. "In 50 years, we won't be able to produce any children at all," Elia said. "Our genetic diversity is collapsing." James studied the data. "Your reproductive method, combining genetic material between females, it's causing a bottleneck effect." Elia nodded. "Each generation, we lose more genetic variations. The Council's solution is to limit who can reproduce even further, selecting only the purest Viridians." "That will only make it worse," James said. "I know." Elia's skin darkened with emotion. "That's why I've been researching alternatives, including human compatibility." She showed him her research. Viridian and human DNA had surprising similarities despite evolving on different planets. "Is that possible?" James asked. "Cross-species compatibility." "Theoretically." Elia pulled up more images. "Our reproductive systems are different, but our basic genetic building blocks follow similar patterns. I believe human DNA might provide the diversity we need." James spent hours reviewing her work. The science was sound but incomplete. "I need samples," Elia said finally. "Human genetic material to test my theory." James looked up from the display. "You mean from me?" "Yes." Her eyes shifted to a soft purple. "But I understand if you refuse." "No," James said after a moment. "I'll help. It's why I'm here, isn't it? To foster cooperation between our species." Over the next few weeks, they met secretly in Elia's lab. During the day, James endured the continuing mockery of Viridian scientists. At night, he worked with Elia on what might save their species. Their first breakthrough came when they successfully combined human and Viridian genetic sequences in a simulation. "It works," Elia exclaimed, her skin glowing with excitement. "The simulation shows viable embryo development." "In theory," James cautioned, "we'd need actual testing to confirm." As they worked, James noticed Elia was different from other Viridians. She asked questions about Earth with genuine interest rather than contempt. "Is it true humans form pair bonds based on emotion?" she asked one night. "Many do," James answered. "We call it love." "Love," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "Viridians don't have that. Reproduction is duty, not choice." "That sounds lonely," James said. Elia's eyes met his. "It is." One night, Director Mira nearly discovered them. They had to hide in a storage closet while she inspected the garden dome. "Why is she here so late?" James whispered. "She suspects something," Elia replied, pressed close to him in the dark space. "She's been watching me." When Mira finally left, they emerged, but the close call changed something between them. A new awareness existed that hadn't been there before. Their second breakthrough came a week later. Using James's DNA, they created a viable embryo sequence that could potentially develop in a Viridian. "We've done it," Elia said, staring at the results. "At least on the molecular level." "Now what?" James asked. Elia took a deep breath. "Now we need to show Director Mira. We can't keep this secret anymore. It's too important." "Will she listen?" James asked. She hasn't exactly been friendly toward human science. She's cold, but not blind, Elia said. If we show her proof that this could save our species, she'll have to listen. As they gathered their research, Elia's hand brushed against James's. Neither pulled away. Whatever happens, she said softly, thank you. James looked at her, this alien woman who had shown him kindness when others showed only contempt. We'll face it together, he promised. Neither knew that their discovery would soon shake both their worlds to the core. Director Mira's face remained perfectly still as she reviewed the data James and Elia presented. The three of them sat alone in her private office, a stark space with few decorations except for a certificate of genetic excellence on the wall. This research is unauthorized, Mira said finally, her eyes shifting to a cold gray. You've broken at least 7 Academy regulations. Yes, Director, Elia admitted. Her skin had paled with nervousness, but she kept her voice steady. But the results? The results suggest we should mate with humans. Mira cut in, disgust evident in her tone. You propose saving our species by mixing with a primitive race. James cleared his throat. With respect, Director, the data shows Viridians are facing extinction within 3 generations. Our research offers a solution. A desperate one. Mira stood and walked to the window overlooking the Crystal City. For a long moment, she said nothing, just stared out at the lights of Lustra. Do you know why I became director? She asked suddenly. My genetic profile was the purest in 5 generations. I was chosen to lead because my lineage is untainted. She turned back to them. And now you bring me this. We brought you the truth, Elia said, no matter how uncomfortable. Mira's eyes narrowed, but then something unexpected happened. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. The truth, she repeated. Yes, the truth that our superior reproduction method is failing us. She pressed a button on her desk, and a hidden panel opened in the wall. Behind it was a laboratory far more sophisticated than Elia's hidden one. You think you're the first to discover this problem? Mira asked. I've been researching solutions for 20 years. On screens around the room, James saw failed experiments and dead ends, all attempts to solve the Viridian genetic crisis. You've known all along, Elia whispered. Of course I've known. The Council has known for decades. Why do you think we sought contact with Earth in the first place? Mira looked directly at James. It wasn't for cultural exchange. You needed human genetic material, James said, understanding dawning. We needed options, Mira corrected. Humans were one possibility among many species we've studied. She walked over to their data and reviewed it again. Your approach is crude but promising. Better than anything I've managed. She seemed to be wrestling with herself before making a decision. Continue your work, but under my supervision. No one else must know. Not yet. Thank you, Director, Elia said, relief evident in her voice. Don't thank me. The Council will have both our heads if this fails, or worse, if it succeeds. Mira gave James a cold look. The human will need to provide more samples. I have a name, James said firmly, and I'll help however I can. Over the next month, their work progressed rapidly with Mira's resources. They moved from simulations to actual laboratory testing. The first embryos failed, but each attempt brought refinements. One night, as James and Elia worked late in Mira's lab, he noticed Elia seemed distracted. What's bothering you? He asked. We're creating life, she said softly. A new kind of life that's never existed before. She looked up at him. If we succeed, what happens to the child? A hybrid with no place in either world. They'll have us, James said without thinking. Elia's skin flushed a deep blue, an emotion he hadn't seen before. Us. Before he could respond, the lab door opened, and Mira entered with an unusually excited expression. Experiment 17 is viable, she announced. The embryo has survived past the critical phase. They gathered around the incubation chamber where a tiny cluster of cells pulsed with life. part human, part Viridian. It's working, Elia breathed. Now we need a volunteer, Mira said. A Viridian willing to carry the embryo to term. Her words hung in the air. Carrying an embryo was sacred in Viridian culture, reserved for those chosen by the council. Carrying a hybrid would be seen as sacrilege by many. I'll do it, Elia said suddenly. James and Mira both turned to her in shock. You can't, Mira said. Your genetic profile isn't approved for reproduction. Exactly, Elia replied. I have nothing to lose. My genetic line ends with me anyway. She looked at James, then back to Mira. I believe in this research. I'll carry the child. The council will never approve, Mira warned. Then don't tell them, Elia said. Not until it's too late to stop it. James watched the two Viridian women stare at each other, realizing that whatever happened next would change both their worlds forever. Very well, Mira said finally. We begin tomorrow. Word spread quickly despite their efforts to keep it secret. 2 weeks after the procedure that placed the hybrid embryo in Elia's body, James noticed the stares in the hallways had changed. No longer merely curious or contemptuous, they now held fear, disgust, and sometimes, most surprisingly, hope. How did they find out? James asked Mira during their daily meeting. The director's mouth tightened. There are no secrets in a society built on genetic monitoring. Elia's body chemistry changed. The medical systems detected it. James felt a chill. Is she in danger? We all are, Mira replied. The High Council has called for an emergency meeting. We've been summoned. Elia was waiting for them outside the council chambers, her skin pale with stress. She wore a loose robe that hid the barely visible changes to her body. James fought the urge to take her hand. Whatever happens, Mira told them, let me do the talking. The council chambers formed a perfect circle, with 7 tall chairs arranged in a semicircle on a raised platform. The councilors looked down at them, with expressions ranging from open hostility to cautious interest. Head Councilor Tara, the oldest Viridian James had ever seen, spoke first. Director Mira, you stand accused of genetic contamination, a crime punishable by permanent exile. How do you respond? Mira stepped forward. I respond with data, Counselor. She activated a holographic display showing the declining birth rates. Our species will be extinct in 3 generations unless we find a solution. So you chose to mix our pure genetic line with this. Another counselor gestured dismissively at James. I chose survival over extinction. Mira replied calmly. The debate raged for hours. Some counselors called for immediate termination of the embryo and punishment for all involved. Others seemed interested in the scientific breakthrough, if not the method. Finally, a thin Viridian with unusually pale skin spoke. I wish to hear from the human. James stepped forward, acutely aware of being the only male in the chamber. My name is Dr. James Miller. I came to Lustra to learn and to help. And you believe impregnating one of our females helps us? The pale counselor asked. I believe offering genetic diversity helps you, James replied. Your reproductive methods have created a bottleneck. Each generation loses more genetic variation. Humans can provide what you've lost. At the cost of our purity, another counselor spat. At the cost of your pride, James corrected. What good is purity if your species dies out? A murmur ran through the chamber. Elia stepped forward without being called. Counselors, I carry this child willingly. My genetic line was deemed unfit for reproduction anyway. If this fails, you lose nothing. If it succeeds, our people have a future. The council deliberated privately for nearly an hour. James, Elia, and Mira waited in tense silence. When the counselors returned, head counselor Tara's face was grim. We have reached a decision. The experiment will be allowed to continue under strict monitoring. If successful, further research may be permitted. If unsuccessful, all records will be purged, and all 3 of you will face exile. As they left the chamber, News awaited them. Captain Lisa Reed had arrived from Earth with an emergency delegation. The Earth government learned of your experiment, Lisa told James privately. They're concerned about exploitation of human genetic material. They've sent me to investigate. It's not exploitation, James insisted. I volunteered. Lisa studied his face. The diplomatic implications are enormous. If this child survives, it changes everything between our species. That's the point, James said. It should change everything. Later that night, James found Elia in the garden dome, sitting beneath the glowing blue tree where they had first conspired. Are you afraid? He asked, sitting beside her. Yes, she admitted, but not of the council, or even of what grows inside me. She looked at him with eyes that had shifted to a color he'd never seen before, a soft gold that seemed to glow from within. I'm afraid of what I feel for you. Viridians aren't supposed to form attachments like this. Like what? James asked. Like humans do. Like... She searched for the word. Love. James reached out slowly and took her hand. Her skin felt warmer than before, almost human in temperature. I'm afraid too, he confessed, but not of that. Above them, through the clear dome, the stars of two worlds watched as boundaries between species began to blur. Elia's pregnancy progressed with unexpected changes. By the 3rd month, her normally green skin developed patches of pink, more human-like in tone. Her body temperature rose steadily. The medical monitors beeped constantly as they tracked these unprecedented developments. Is this normal? James asked Dr. Neela, the Viridian physician Mira had assigned to the case. Nothing about this is normal, Neela replied, reviewing the latest scans. But mother and child appear healthy, despite the changes. Elia lay on the examination table, her hand protectively over her growing belly. The child moves differently than Viridian embryos, she said. More active, almost playful. Word of the pregnancy had spread throughout the Viridian population. The academy hallways were now filled with whispers whenever James or Elia passed. Some Viridians looked at them with disgust, but a surprising number approached them privately. My genetic profile was rejected last year, one young Viridian scientist told Elia in the lab. If your experiment works, would I be allowed to try too? I don't know, Elia admitted, but I hope so. Captain Lisa Reed extended her stay on Lustra, turning her investigation into a formal diplomatic mission. She negotiated terms with the High Council. If the hybrid child was born healthy, a formal genetic exchange program would be considered. You've started something bigger than yourself, Lisa told James during one of their meetings. Earth is divided on the issue. Some see it as the next step in human evolution. Others fear it blurs the lines of what it means to be human. Those lines were always blurrier than we thought, James replied. During the 5th month, a radical group of Viridian purists broke into the medical facility. They tried to reach Elia's room, but were stopped by security. The attack shook everyone. You need better protection, Mira insisted, assigning guards to Elia and James. The extremists won't stop. They see this child as the end of Viridian purity, or the beginning of Viridian survival, Elia countered, her hand on her now prominent belly. The pregnancy took a toll on Elia's body. The hybrid grew faster than a normal Viridian embryo, requiring more nutrients and energy. Elia often exhausted herself just walking across a room. You need rest, James insisted one evening, finding her working late in the lab. I need answers, she replied, showing him data from her latest self-examination. My body chemistry is changing permanently. The child's DNA is affecting mine. James reviewed the data with growing concern. The hybrid was introducing human genetic sequences into Elia's system, something they hadn't anticipated. Should we be worried? He asked. Elia shook her head. It's not harmful, just unexpected. Like everything about this process, she looked up at him with those gold eyes that had become permanent. Like everything about us. During the 7th month, something remarkable happened. 5 more Viridian females approached Director Mira, volunteering for the hybrid program. "They've seen my progress," Elia said, her voice filled with hope. "They believe it can work." The council reluctantly approved a limited trial. James found himself working with Mira to develop a protocol for additional hybrid pregnancies. Earth sent a team of geneticists to assist. "Did you ever imagine this would happen?" Lisa asked James as they watched humans and Viridians working side by side in the lab. "Honestly, no," he admitted. "I just wanted to help one person." He glanced toward Elia, who was teaching a human scientist about Viridian biology. "But I'm glad it did." That night, as James helped Elia walk through the garden dome, now their favorite place to escape the constant monitoring, she suddenly stopped. "The baby," she gasped, clutching her belly. "What's wrong?" James asked, panic rising in his throat. But Elia smiled, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach. "Feel." Under his palm, James felt a strong kick, then another. The sensation brought tears to his eyes. "That's our child," Elia whispered, "the first of a new kind." "What will we name it?" James asked. Elia looked thoughtful. "Viridians name children after their purpose." "What is our child's purpose?" James thought for a moment. "Hope," he said finally. "On both our worlds, this child represents hope." Elia nodded, her golden eyes shining. "Hope, a good name for a new beginning." As the stars shone overhead, James realized that whatever happened next, whatever challenges they faced, nothing would ever be the same for humans or Viridians again. The day Hope was born, both sons of Lustra shone brightly in a clear sky. The medical facility was under heavy guard, with both Viridian security and human officers from Earth's diplomatic corps stationed at every entrance. Inside the birthing chamber, Elia's labor had lasted 14 hours, shorter than a typical Viridian birth, but longer than a human one. James had stayed by her side the entire time, despite the shocked looks from Viridian medical staff. On their world, birth was a clinical process, not a shared experience. "One more push," Dr. Neela instructed as monitors beeped rapidly around them. Elia gripped James's hand with strength that almost crushed his fingers. Her skin glowed with an inner light that pulsed with each contraction. With a final effort, she brought their child into the world. The room fell silent as Dr. Neela held up the infant. Hope's skin was a soft blend of human pink and Viridian green, creating a pearl-like shimmer. The baby had 5 fingers like a human, not the 6 of a Viridian. But the eyes, when they finally opened, shifted colors like Viridian eyes. "She's beautiful," James whispered, tears streaming down his face. "She?" Elia asked, exhausted but smiling. "A female." Dr. Neela nodded, checking the infant's vitals. "Yes, female. And perfectly healthy from all readings." The news spread quickly across both worlds. On Lustra, crowds gathered outside the medical facility, some in protest, but many more in celebration. On Earth, the images of hope were broadcast globally, sparking debates about the future of both species. Within days, the other hybrid pregnancies showed accelerated development. The Viridian Council, seeing the success of the first birth, reluctantly approved an expanded program. Dozens more volunteers came forward. "You've started a revolution," Lisa told James as they watched Hope sleep in her special chamber, designed to maintain her unique biological needs. "But not everyone is happy about it." "Revolutions are never easy," James replied. "But they're necessary sometimes." 6 months after Hope's birth, the changes in Viridian society were dramatic. The rigid genetic hierarchy began to crumble as more hybrids were born. Each showed unique combinations of human and Viridian traits. Some had more human features, others more Viridian. All were healthy, and all were developing faster than children of either species. Hope herself could already speak simple words in both human and Viridian languages. Her skin could shift slightly in color based on her emotions, a trait neither species possessed naturally. Most remarkably, She showed telepathic abilities that scientists of both worlds were eager to study. She's neither human nor Viridian, Elia explained to a joint scientific committee. She's something new, better than both. A year after the first successful birth, a permanent treaty was signed between Earth and Lustra. The genetic exchange program became official, with careful protocols established to ensure ethical treatment of all participants. James and Elia founded the Harmony Institute, dedicated to advancing cooperation between the species. The same building that had once housed secret experiments now openly welcomed scientists from both worlds. Director Mira, who had initially opposed the idea of hybrids, became one of their strongest advocates after seeing the results. "We were wrong to mock humans," she admitted to James privately. "Your perceived weakness, your genetic diversity, was exactly what we needed." On Hope's second birthday, a celebration was held in the Garden Dome. Human and Viridian children played together under the glowing trees. Among them, Hope and the other hybrid children showed the adults what the future could be, a blending of strengths from both worlds. "Did you ever imagine this would happen?" Elia asked James as they watched their daughter lead the other children in a game. "Never," he admitted. "When I came to Lustra, I was just trying to learn about your species. I never thought I'd help create a new one." Elia's golden eyes, now permanently changed by the pregnancy, gazed at the children. "The Viridians who mocked humans thought we were superior because we could reproduce without males. We never considered that might be our greatest weakness." "And now?" James asked, taking her hand. "Now we know better. Difference isn't weakness, it's strength." She smiled as Hope ran toward them, her pearl-like skin glowing in the soft light. "And our daughter proves it every day." As the two suns of Lustra set on the horizon, the stars of both worlds twinkled in the darkening sky, witness to a new beginning for two species who had once regarded each other with mockery and suspicion, but now looked to a shared future with hope.